Hi there, welcome to OLC 40, Term 1A. We are on class number 7, and today we're going to be looking at assignments number 9 and number 10. We're also going to be looking at reading logs and discussing adverbs. If you are trying to find the contact information, the most important one is please email your assignments to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Do not email them to me directly because they will get lost if the teacher ever changed. The secretary needs to log the work and then they have access to it, and the other teachers would have access to it if a new teacher took over the course. Please always write your full name, the course name, the assignment number on name on every assignment, right up at the top so we can see it. Also label if it's the rough or the good draft of a writing assignment because they often have different marking schemes and they're worth different amount of marks, and I usually compare them. So they should usually be submitted both at the same time. If you're wanting to call while I'm talking in the studio, 1-800-465-7144. If you want to fax your work, 1-800-463-7852. If you want to ask me a question, jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. You can also talk to me on Facebook, capital G, capital P-E-R-C-Y, space, capital W-A-H-S-A. I'm at the same address for YouTube. I always record the classes and I post them there. So if you miss a class, you can always check there. If you get kind of ahead of us, if you're like a fast worker, you can check term 2A or term 2B from last year, and they should be able to explain most of the assignments. If you're looking for me in the office, I'm usually here from 8:30 to 11:30 and then 1:30 to 4:30 Monday to Thursday. On Friday, I'm here from 8:30 to 12 and then 1 to 3:30. Office hours change from term to term, and term 1A is completed on October 1st. So after that point, just call the office and ask them what time I'm normally in. If you need to take a photograph of an assignment, which happens for a few of them, please send it as an attachment to an email and always explain who you are, what the subject is, all that kind of stuff. If you send it directly, like as the email, it's very hard for us to print off and it doesn't show properly on the computer. Okay, so if you do go to my YouTube channel, I just wanted to kind of show, if you click on the playlists tab, the very first list that you see that comes up is 2024, 2025, and it'll say OLC 40 Term 1A. That is the most current playlist. There's also Term 2B and Term 2A if you're looking for a different assignment. Okay. So our learning goals for today. By the end of today's class and assignments, you will be able to write complete and correct sentences and use punctuation correctly, including the ability to understand and use adverbs in a sentence. Construct personal reflections in paragraph form, choosing a clear focus and using appropriate examples to explain your thinking. Keep a learning journal that documents the steps you're taking to monitor your learning in the course, and demonstrate understanding that reading is an active process of thinking and constructing meaning. All right, so we're going to start with the correct sentences. Like I said, we're just kind of tackling a little bit of grammar every day. There's a lot, and a lot of it's kind of finicky, but it's helpful when I'm talking to you about like, hey, can we fix this or that? If you're not sure what they are, it's kind of hard for them to be fixed. Okay, so adverbs are words that have the job of describing a verb, another adverb, or even sometimes an adjective. An adverb may go in front of or behind a word that it is describing. So if I said the boy is running quickly, quickly is the adverb and it's describing the verb running. If I said the boy is running very quickly, very is an adverb describing the other adverb quickly, right? The boy is surprisingly fast. Fast is actually an adjective. And surprisingly is describing the adjective. How fast? It's surprisingly fast. So we're most of us are aware of the describing the verbs, but a lot of times we aren't aware of how it can describe other adverbs and adjectives. So I'm just kind of pointing that out. Where do you put an adverb in a sentence? Remember, we've talked about how English has strong sense of word order to introduce meaning. Adverbs are one of those funny ones that can go in a lot of different places. First of all, they can go in front of a sentence to introduce the entire rest of the sentence. Like tomorrow, we go to Disneyland. Next week, exams will start. After he cried for an hour, the baby fell asleep. All of those tomorrow, next week, after he cried for an hour, those are adverbs or adverb phrases that are describing the rest of the sentence. But they could come at the end of the sentence as long as it's not too far from the verb they're modifying. It kind of depends on how long a sentence you write. There are times where the adverb might get lost and the reader might feel confused about what are we describing now. So you want it to be kind of close. So we go to Disneyland tomorrow. Tomorrow is describing going. Exams will start for science next week. Next week is describing when things will start. After he cried for an hour is describing fell asleep. The baby fell asleep after he cried for an hour. And you can see they have kind of the exact same information. The thing is when you're putting the adverb, especially if it's a time adverb in front, it kind of places some emphasis on the time just because it's the first thing that you see. You also put a little comma afterwards to kind of show that it's not the very beginning of a sentence where you would expect to see a subject. When it's at the end of a sentence, you don't need to put any kind of comma there because it just flows naturally and is where it's kind of expected to be. An adverb can be one word, it could be a phrase, or it could even be a clause. So an adverb, one word, things like soon, now, easily, perhaps, always, tomorrow, extremely. It can also be a phrase, like a group of words together. Next week, more successfully, for fun, before the holidays. It can even be an adverbial clause. Remember, a clause has to have a subject and a verb. So things like when I arrive, after she gets there, before she forgets, as soon as she can. There are even things called conjunctive adverbs, but those are a little bit complicated, so we're not going to get into them right now. Okay, there are a whole bunch of different categories of adverbs. In other words, like they are adverbs, but they do a special type of description, okay? So here are the main types of adverbs. And I'm really only mentioning this because a lot of times in grade school, we may have been taught a very simple definition of adverbs where it's that adverbs end in ly. And that's true for a lot of adverbs of manner, but it's definitely not true for all adverbs. And so it's kind of confusing if you don't have a complete definition. There are adverbs of manner, adverbs of place, of time, of frequency, of purpose, degree, and condition. There are also some unusual adverb categories such as conjunctive adverbs and focusing adverbs. They're not super important, so they're not really related to what we're working on right now either. Okay. So I'm going to look at those categories just so you get better at recognizing adverbs when reading, and that you have a larger bank of adverbs in your memory when we're writing. Okay, adverbs of manner. That just means it's telling us the manner it's done or how it's done. These are the traditional adverbs that we think of that end in the ly. Like the old lady walked carefully. He quietly crept out of the room. So it can be in front of the verb or after the verb. Mom brushed his hair gently. And here it's not even right in front or after. It's after what's being brushed. My sister accidentally killed the rabbit when it ran in front of the car. He defused the bomb with steady hands. So basically, if it answers the question how, then it's an adverb of manner. Adverbs of place can sometimes be the same as a preposition, right? The biggest difference is that an adverb will be describing the action, like she fell down. Down is how she fell. Prepositions are normally linking a noun or a noun phrase to the rest of the sentence, like he went down the stairs or up the stairs. It's linking the phrase of the stairs. Some common adverbs of place are up, down, north, south, inside, outside, everywhere, anywhere, here, there, around. So again, it's not super important that you know that it's an adverb of place versus a preposition, just kind of giving you some information so you're aware that there can be some kind of overlap, basically. She looked up, that's an adverb. She looked up the hill, here it's acting as a preposition. The boys and girls ran around, around is acting as an adverb. The boys and girls ran around the block, Here it's acting as a preposition because prepositions are linking words, whereas adverbs are more of a describing word. Dad looked everywhere. Everywhere is describing how he looked. Dad looked everywhere for his key. Here it's linking the phrase for his key. The golf ball went far. Far is describing where it went. The golf ball went far off the course. Here it's linking the phrase off the course. Okay. Adverbs of time, frequency, and duration. That's been, yeah, okay, we're good. Um, Adverbs of time are sometimes split into three categories. Again, this is being super finicky and fussy, but for some people, these kind of details are really, really important, and I want to make sure I'm kind of clear about them. When an action happened, tomorrow, yesterday, soon, immediately, often, or never. The frequency of the action, like that's an action that's going to happen over and over again. Hourly, daily, monthly, yearly, annually. The duration of the action, how long it occurs, briefly, permanently, temporarily, already, shortly, any longer. So for example, for when, I write my exam tomorrow. Frequency, we get paid bi-monthly. Duration, the pain from the shot will last briefly. Sometimes several adverbs of time might be used in one sentence. She left work temporarily, which is talking about the duration, yesterday afternoon. She's talking about when it happened. Yesterday afternoon, she left work temporarily. Oh, so just point out that might be an easier way to make it clear that when it happened, right? The plane usually arrives daily. Okay. Adverbs of purpose, or sometimes they're called adverbs of reason. They're often phrases with several words. He ran for fun. She lied to protect him. To lead them astray, the criminal planted false evidence. The school is closed due to the icy roads. The police guarded the murderer carefully since he was known for escaping. These are there's a little overlap here with these and prepositions, right? Some other examples would be things like therefore, so that, hence, consequently, in order to, since, thus, and lest, which is kind of an old-fashioned word, like the song, like lest we forget. And then adverbs of degree. These are where they're describing how much or yeah, degree. Degree, not in like degrees like Celsius, but degree like how little or how big an amount. Okay. So it still can be used to describe verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. With a verb, I could say she almost completed all the questions. Her mom scarcely believed they had eaten all the stew. It can also work with an adjective. The runner was extremely thirsty. My friend had been deeply unhappy. It's often when you're trying to like put emphasis or kind of add a condition to things. The student driver parked very carefully. Somewhat haphazardly, the boy began to pack his things. So some other examples are almost, absolutely, barely, completely, deeply, enough, entirely, extremely, fairly, hardly, how incredibly, just, least, lots, most, nearly, perfectly, purely, really, scarcely, simply, so, somewhat, strongly, thoroughly, to, totally, and utterly. Okay. Adverbs of condition are like a limitation being put on things. We will have a picnic unless it rains. He will probably be hungry by 9 o'clock. Perhaps they can celebrate tonight. We will go tomorrow, provided we get time off. In case of fire, pull the alarm. We need to pay the bill by Friday. Otherwise, there will be a late fee. All right, just like adjectives, adverbs have a certain order that they have to follow in a sentence. Many times we generally kind of follow this instinctively, and it'll sound weird to us or to other people if we break this pattern. Now, this isn't a hard pattern. There are some There is a little bit of leeway, but generally, and when you're using adverbs in a sentence, you start with adverbs of manner, then adverbs of place, then adverbs of frequency, adverbs of time, and adverbs of purpose. So for example, the boy runs swiftly, that's his manner, across the street, place, every afternoon, frequency, after school, time, because, purpose, he visits his grandma until his parents get off work, which is a lot of adverbs, right? Again, some of those would also count as prepositional phrases or even like a second clause. However, remember that you can use adverbs of time and frequency to introduce an entire sentence, which would probably make this sentence more understandable. Every afternoon, the boy runs swiftly across the street after school because he visits his grandma until his parents get off work. So here we've switched off the order because it's more clear, right? All right. Help locate the adverbs in the sentence. The boy calmly took his test. So that one's kind of easy because it's one of the ly ones. Calmly is describing how he took the test. The winner ran very quickly. Very and quickly are both adverbs. Quickly is describing how he ran, and very is describing quickly, which I know is funny. The teams were extremely discouraged. Extremely is the adverb, and it's describing the adjective discouraged. It's how discouraged they were. Yesterday, the doctor informed me that the cancer was gone. So here, yesterday is an adverb of time. Last week, that boy walked dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. So there's an adverb of time, last week. And then dangerously is another adverb, and it's describing close. Okay. I believe close would also be an adverb there. All right. The soldiers fought until they could no longer stand up. Here, this is kind of an adverb of purpose. It's giving you a reason. Okay. So moving on. We're going to be discussing assignment 9, and it's meeting these learning goals or these expectations from the curriculum. I can construct personal reflections in paragraph form, choosing a clear focus and using appropriate examples to explain my thinking. I can keep a learning journal that documents the steps I am taking to monitor my learning in the course. And I can demonstrate understanding that reading is an active process of thinking and constructing meaning. So I'm listing these just so you understand that I'm not just kind of like randomly choosing things. The assignments are directly linked to what the government has said. Hey, here is what we want you to make sure you teach in the course. So this is just kind of me rephrasing what I'm given as my directive to teach, okay? As far as the learning journal, when we did assignment 5, that was sort of beginning the journals. Like that was a very organized one. This one is a little more loose. It's a more typical learning journal. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do a journal. It's a little bit different than sometimes the journals that we did in school. Here is the actual assignment, okay? Now, if you have an older version of the course, you have a different assignment. So preferably, I would like people to update to the new version. So if you're out there hearing this and this doesn't match what you have in your unit, please contact me. I would be happy to send you a copy of the more current version of the course, okay? Assignment number 9, journal on reading. This is worth 10 marks. How do you feel about using reading strategies to help your comprehension? You may be very familiar with these, or they may be brand new to you. The strategies we've used so far are predictions, making connections, visualizing, asking questions, locating the main idea and details, and reflecting on the message or theme. Which of these strategies seemed easy to you, and explain why they seemed easy? Which reading strategies seemed hard, and what made them seem hard? Write at least 1 to 2 sentences on which strategies you'll use the most in reading the rest of this novel. The entire journal should be at least 6 sentences long, but it could easily be a lot longer, okay? Okay, also, I want to point out this journal, we're kind of reflecting on our use of reading strategies, which we used in assignments 6, 7, and 8. If you haven't done those assignments yet, stop, go back, do those assignments first, and then you can do the journal. There's no way to do the journal without having done those assignments because you won't have anything to talk about. Okay. So go on back and do those assignments first, please. All right. Diary journal versus a learning journal. A lot of us may have memories of doing journals in grade school. It's a pretty common writing assignment. And often we could write in them about whatever was going on in our lives. And we kind of had complete freedom to write about whatever we felt like, okay, about our life. Sorry, combined two words there. Whatever we felt like about our life. That kind of journal is more like a diary, right? But the kind of journal we're doing in this course is specifically meant to help you reflect or think back on what you've learned or your progress. That's why we call it a learning journal. So if you're having difficulties with understanding certain lessons or practicing some of the skills we're working on, this is a great opportunity to let me know so I can help you with the difficulties. But also it's a way for you to think about, and the big word they use all the time these days is consolidate. A lot of times when we think back about what we've learned, we kind of like cement that learning in our brain and kind of hang on to the really important parts. So that's kind of the process we're trying to work on here, okay? So, okay. This type of journal is a form of self-assessment. It's kind of like you become the teacher or an outside observer of yourself or your work. And you're trying to look for what are your strengths, what is going well, what do you feel confident about, where do you see improvement? We also try to look for areas of, I put improvement here, but really areas that need improvement, I'm going to say instead here, right? Areas that need improvement. What are some places where you don't feel confident? Sometimes we feel bored or we hate certain assignments or activities, and it's often because we find them difficult. This is also the place where you can discuss confusion. Maybe you feel like you're doing A plus work, but don't understand why your work seems to be getting C pluses instead. Often looking at the rubric I've included should help, but sometimes we aren't sure how to get from a level C to a level B in a certain area. Now I'm talking generally about all journals. I'm not talking about this specific assignment. I'm just talking generally our learning journals. This is something that you should be doing when you're doing them, okay? So now talking, okay, specifically, looking at the reading strategies that we've used in the last three assignments, number 6, number 7, number 8. So in number 6, we made predictions about the novel. We asked questions about the novel. And we also made connections between the title and our lives or experiences. So those are 3 reading strategies: making predictions, asking questions, and making connections. In assignment number 7, we made some more connections between chapter number 1 and our lives. We reviewed our predictions to see if they were correct, and then we made new predictions. We visualized the events in the chapter and prioritized which ones were important. We also gave our opinion on the novel and supported it with evidence from the text, which means you may have summarized things to do that. For assignment number 8, this one's tricky to say what strategies you used because there was like 13 different prompts and you got to choose which one you used. Because of that, different students probably practiced different skills. If you picked prompts that talked about what was most important, what you learned, the main idea, you probably prioritized information and summarized it. Summarizing is just kind of shortening. If you wrote about what you wondered or why the author wrote something or why a character did or didn't do something, then you were basically asking questions. If you wrote about what was the message or purpose of the chapter, you may have been summarizing, making connections, or making inferences, conclusions based on evidence from the text. If you wrote about bias or what was missing in the chapter, you may have been making connections from your own experiences and knowledge of the world. So in this journal, we're still going to be using a typical paragraph format. We've talked about this before. It's the hamburger format. It's just kind of a visual to help you remember, right? Again, the top bun is our topic sentence. We have all our meaty, good information in the middle, and that should be the biggest part of your paragraph. And then there should be a final closing sentence that kind of echoes or is similar to the topic sentence. Okay. We summarize it this way. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to talk about, then I talk about it, and then I remind you what we talked about, okay? That's all it really is. For a reflective journal, you might open your paragraph with a restatement of the topic and your opinion on it. Now, that doesn't mean I want you to rewrite the entire assignment. I do have people do that sometimes, but you really don't need to. You would just make a brief summary. So here is the full assignment. You can see it's a lot of different sentences. But when I read that assignment over, basically one part stands out to me, and it's the main line. How do you feel about using reading strategies to help your comprehension? All the other sentences are kind of expanding on that bigger concept and giving you some specific details they want you to write about. But the big thing is what is your opinion on using reading strategies? Okay. The phrase, how do you feel, is that clue that they want your opinion. So knowing that, here is what my opening sentence might sound like. I felt that using reading strategies was somewhat hard because I had never used many of them before this course. And then I would begin to go into the meat of my paragraph and discuss all the details. Okay. But I would give myself some sort of opening sentence. It does not have to sound exactly like this, but I should know what your opinion was about using reading strategies. Okay, this is a different paragraph, but I just kind of want to talk about the parts of the paragraph in a more kind of detailed sense. Here, the very first sentence is your opening sentence. You should always either give the main idea or your opinion, the big part, the big overall of the idea that you're going to be writing about. Okay. And then see all these other sentences. That's called the body of the paragraph, right? It's the most important part, but that first sentence sets you up so you know what you're going to be getting and talking about. And then the last sentence should be a closing sentence that sort of echoes the top and is similar without being exactly the same. So my opening sentence says, my favorite part of high school was always art class. And my bottom sentence says, art class seemed more like a place for fun than work, which is why I loved it so much. So you can see how they're fairly similar and expressing my positive opinion on art class. Okay, so now how do we do the body of the text? So first of all, I would suggest that you look back at the three assignments, number 6, number 7, number 8, for ideas on what to say. Look at your marks and look at the comments from your teacher. I'm assuming you've handed these in already, right? Which questions did you get low marks on, and which questions did you get high marks on? Which of the reading strategies seemed easy? Why were they easy for you? Now remember that everyone is different. So another student may have found strategy that you found easy quite hard. So this is different for every person, right? Here's an example of what that might sound like. I found the assignment where we used visualizing easy because I pictured what is going on in the chapter as I read. Then I just had to decide which events were the most important to draw. This part seemed easy as those events just stood out in my memory. Okay. So you wouldn't write what I wrote, but that's an example of how it might sound. Okay. Then look about where you found strategies that were hard or confusing. It may have been because you didn't quite understand what the assignment was asking you to do, or because you'd never used that strategy before. Like I found some students get predictions mixed up and they think it's about asking questions. So they're kind of confused what the word means. Other people find doing predictions hard because they're not really sure how to make those kind of guesses, right? So sometimes we've used a reading strategy in other parts of our life, just kind of as a thinking strategy. So it's really easy for us to apply it to books and text. Other times we don't use that strategy much, so it's harder to apply. So for example, I grew up in a house where people like talked back to the TV. I don't know if you do that in your family. So if, you had the first 5 minutes and something would happen on the screen, like, oh, a beautiful blonde shows up, you'd be like, oh, she's going to die, or oh, she's going to be the one that has the affair. And we would immediately start like making predictions about what might happen with that person, right? So it isn't something I did just with reading, it was something I did with other things as well. So then it's really easy to use with reading. But that may not have been typical in your family. We were probably kind of weird. So that's why sometimes these strategies can be harder, right? An example of what this might sound like in your paragraph might be something like, I had a hard time asking questions before I read because I haven't really done that before. I'm used to someone else asking me questions after I've done the reading. So it was kind of hard to think of questions by myself. Okay. That's totally valid to say. I didn't just say I had a hard time asking questions. I explained the reasons why I thought that it was hard for me. Okay. That gives me help understanding what I might be able to do to make it easier. I can't always, but sometimes I can. It also helps you know, oh, hey, this is maybe hard for me because I haven't had a chance to do it before, right? And then when you finished doing all that, remember you need at least 6 sentences, which should be easy. There's actually kind of one more concept we have to talk about. I feel like I've just forgotten something. Hang on a second. Oh, sorry, something's kind of just niggling my mind. Oh, which strategies do you think you're going to be using the most in the rest of the novel? So sometimes we just naturally are going to use certain kinds of strategies. Like I love to visualize. I'm pretty much guarantee I'm going to be using visualizing, right? But sometimes a strategy that's hard for us might be the one that is most useful, right? Like maybe summarizing what you read is kind of useful to you because it helps you understand what were the most important parts. So you have to choose that. That's not me. That's what you think you're going to use, okay? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody might have a different answer for that. Okay. So after you've done that, you're going to wrap up your journal with a closing sentence. I really find this is the trickiest part for many students, but it's just a way to make an overall conclusion or restate your opinion on the main topic in an interesting way. Just like you wouldn't end a conversation with somebody by just walking out of the room without saying goodbye, you really shouldn't end a piece of writing without signaling to your audience that you've finished what you're going to say. So you might make an overall statement about how using reading strategies felt in the last 3 assignments. Was it easy? Was it kind of interesting? Was it hard? Was it sort of confusing? Was it just annoying? What did you feel about it? You might state your opinion on whether the reading strategies helped you understand the material you read better. That's kind of the reason why we're teaching them, right? It's not just busy work. It's for a lot of people beginning to use these strategies deliberately um, is helping them read better. A lot of us already are using them kind of unconsciously. We're not sort of aware that we're using them. So that's the other thing is sometimes making ourselves more aware of what our brain is doing as we're thinking helps us use it more strategically when we want to. Okay. You could also comment on which strategies you felt were more effective or more useful than others, especially on these assignments. Sometimes like there's certain reading strategies might be really useful for a novel, but might not be so useful for a textbook or the other way around. So you can specify for the what you read whether it was effective or useful too. Okay, some common introductory phrases that can help signal that you are coming to the end of your paragraph are things like, in closing, comma, I feel that dot dot dot. So that dot 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 is an ellipse, right? And do you guys remember what an ellipse means? It means that the words aren't finished yet and they want you to finish. So you wouldn't just write that, you would finish the sentence. And you wouldn't use the dot dot dots in your version, right? Because you would have the actual words. So having an ellipse there wouldn't make any sense, right? You would just erase the ellipse and finish your words. Some other example phrases that kind of show that to your reader, hey, we're at the end, would be things like, in conclusion, it seems to me that dot dot dot. Looking back at my work, I feel that dot dot dot. Overall, I believe that dot dot dot. In my opinion, reading strategies were dot dot dot. In summary, I think that dot dot dot. You do not have to use any of these, but it can be a good way to give your reader a heads up. Hey, here we are. We're coming to the end of this sentence now. I'm going to wrap everything up in a nice, tidy kind of bow here. All right. That is your paragraph assignment. Moving on. Tracking your reading in the course for your final portfolio. Another one of the requirements for this course, and again, I don't write the requirements, that's from the government, is that students are supposed to keep an inventory of all the texts they read for the course and then what days they finished them. Okay. So we gave you a little reading log in the course. Up top, there's a date. It asks what type of text you read, what the title or the author was, the length of time you spent reading, and the main idea or comment. So this counts as your inventory, okay? Um, Depending on whether you have the old version or the newer version, it'll be on different pages, okay? So you'll have to kind of hunt around a little bit to find it. You want to do one of these at least once a week. In the book, in your units, there's usually this little guy in purple. He's kind of your reminder, hey, remember to fill out your reading log, okay? You're encouraged to keep a record of everything you read, what you read here, what you read outside here. If you read a Facebook post from a friend, if you're reading letters or emails, if you're reading all about new fishing lure in fishing magazines, if you're reading a cool article about an upcoming event in the Sioux Bulletin, any kind of reading that you do is fair game to go down in here, okay? It becomes part of your literacy portfolio. I look for it, so it does need to be there. You do lose marks if it's not there. Having said that, you don't need to hand it in during the course. Save it and hand it in at the end with the reading portfolio, okay? Which is the very last assignment you do before the culminating activity. So why do we even bother doing a reading log? For some people, if you did reading logs in school, people kind of equate it with being sort of young, but actually a lot of adults also like to keep reading logs. And here are some of the advantages of why adults might want to keep a reading log. For one thing, they bring order and structure to your reading. While reading is fun and entertaining, people who take it a little more seriously agree that reading in a more organized fashion using lists or schedules, daily goals makes the experience a lot more rewarding. By having this mindful approach, you can keep yourself accountable for the amount of reading you make and for meeting your own goals. Like some people might have a goal of reading a novel a month or reading a novel every 2 weeks, or they want to make sure they're reading the paper more often, so they want to read the paper every day. It can also motivate you to read more. Accountability can be a great motivator if you're struggling with the amount of reading you do and you're constantly dreaming about reading more. Having tangible proof of the exact amount of reading you do can be a wake-up call for some and help you realize how much more you could be doing. A reading log can look however you want to look. I'm going to show you some pictures of some examples of interesting reading logs. I'm giving you a very kind of boring, straightforward one, which you probably should use. But if you have a fancy, cool looking one that you want to use instead, just kind of shoot me an example of it and I'll let you know if it meets the criteria. The big thing would be that it tells me what you read and what date you read it. The other thing about having a list of books you've already read, if you read a lot of books or if you go to the library, is um, it's easy to see if you've already read something, or if you're looking for like, hey, remember that novel by that author? I can't think of his name. Oh, wait, and then you look it up in your reading log, and then you can find some other books. Okay, here are some pictures of some adult reading logs. This one is kind of cool. One person like does a little tiny illustration of the cover of the book to help her remember the book she read. Here, this is one where people would like on these little lines like that are books, they would write the name of the book. Some people would do this for chapters, like say if they were trying to read through a big book like War and Peace, they might write like chapter 1, chapter 2 to just kind of help themselves keep track and see the progress they've made. Here, there's kind of a more loose reading log where they've just kind of in each month written what they've read. And here, this is kind of a one. Let me see if I can make it bigger for a second. Hang on. Yep. This is one where you would fill in like a little bit of a book review and answer some questions. You don't have to be that detailed for us, but that's what some people like to do, right? Here's an example of a one that's been filled in. It obviously isn't exactly the same thing, but it's the same concept. November 14th, what did I read? A recipe. It was about easy meatloaf. It took me about 10 minutes to read, and how to make a quick meatloaf. November 15th was a movie review. Matt Seitz's review of the Oppenheimer movie. Took me 20 minutes to read. And my main idea was it seemed a bit put off by the use of close-ups. And then November 16th, I read a novel, 2 chapters in The Lincoln Lawyer, about 15 pages, just introducing the characters and stuff, not sure if I like it yet. November 17th, I read a birthday card from my aunt, Took me 10 minutes. Maybe they wrote me a whole letter in there, right? My mom always writes really long letters, and just catching me up on the news at her house. November 18th, maybe I was reading product reviews. I want to buy a new chainsaw and I'm looking for one that has good reviews on Amazon. I might have spent 30 minutes reading those reviews, still deciding which one is the best one for the money we have. So obviously yours won't look the same as mine. This is just kind of a sample of how it might look. And I understand that you might not read every day. You should, for this course, be reading something every week, though, even if it's just like chapters in our book, okay? So sometimes people are worried that whatever they read doesn't count. So I've got some lists here. I'm probably not going to read every single bit of the list because it's a bit long. You can always pause the video if you are watching this afterwards and see. There's things you do at work, things like scheduling, health and safety posters, emails, letters, invoices, receipts, staff handbook, machine manual. Maybe you got handed a benefits package. Maybe there's a company newsletter, work reports, calendars, inventories, database lists, phone messages, special event notices, or new procedural notices. Now, sometimes people might be surprised by things like a calendar or an invoice. Those are special type of business documents. They are totally valid. A poster might be considered like a graphic type of reading. And again, that's totally valid to include as a type of reading, okay? Traditional reading materials are the kind of things you probably already think of. Short stories, children's books, newspapers, plays, magazines, poems, song lyrics, religious material, novels, anthologies, graphic novels, comic books. You might also be looking at reference materials. Maybe you're looking at dictionaries, a thesaurus, an encyclopedia, atlas or maps. You might be looking at transportation schedules or tickets, textbooks, nature guides, recipe books, car manuals, whatever. All those kinds of things count as reading. Sometimes people think only like novels count, but reading is so much more than just novels. Um, Media. A lot of times you might be reading media like memes, Twitter messages, which is now X, personal emails, promotional emails, messenger texts, online newspapers, online magazines, Snapchat, Instagram, Reddit, all those kind of things would also count. All right. And then maybe you get communication slips from school. If you're younger, maybe from your school. If you're older, maybe from your kid's school. And you might just have everyday kind of ordinary reading that comes in. Personal notices, community notices, election ads, rummage sales, bingo notices, legal documents or medical documents, obituaries, wedding invites, all those kind of things. All right, moving on. Question, yeah, assignment number 10, coincidentally, is kind of related to the reading log. There are a variety of forms of reading and writing that we come across. Take the time to brainstorm a list of at least 12 things you are required to read during your time in high school. Put it right here in the bubble. I just gave you a gigantic list. Pick 12 things. Okay. 6 marks for that. This assignment is in 2 parts. A lot of people notice the big cloud and they don't see the little words down here, but they're actually worth equal marks. Although I think I've made this a little bit. This is 6 marks. This is worth 5 marks. It says the overall assignment was worth 10 marks, but I'm going to say it's 11 marks these days. So in this year's version, I gave the bottom part a page of its own with space to answer it. So it kind of stood out a little more and hopefully more people would answer it. So like this, here's the question, and then I gave you space to write right there. In a paragraph containing at least 5 sentences, comment on the types of reading that you do away from school. Do you like reading? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It does not matter to me. My feelings aren't going to be hurt if you hate reading, as long as you can explain why you don't like reading. Okay, that's all the things. You don't want to just say, I hate reading. There has to be more to your paragraph than that. Okay. I want to point out this is kind of another self-reflection piece, sort of similar to the journal we just did, but just kind of not quite as thorough or detailed. The one thing I find people get a little bit confused on is sometimes people tell me about the kind of reading that everybody does, And this one is really just asking about you. What do you like to read? So do you like reading? And if so, explain why and what you like about it. And if you don't like reading, okay, that's fine. Again, just explain why and what you don't like about it. It still needs to be 5 sentences long and in a paragraph format. So it's not a list, it's a sentence. So if you like reading, you might explain, what do you like to read? Maybe you like to read novels. Maybe you're reading magazines about hunting or crafting. Maybe you like to read the newspaper. Doesn't really matter. There's no right or wrong answer, but just tell me what it is you like to read or don't like to read. So here is an example of how that assignment might sound. And again, obviously I don't want you to copy me. I just know sometimes we're doing a type of writing you may not have seen or heard before. So I'm trying to give you examples so you kind of have a picture in your head of how this might sound. Outside of school, I do a lot of different reading. I like to read novels for fun, but only when I have time to read the whole thing, because I hate putting down a novel if I'm not finished. I also read a lot of quilting magazines in order to get new ideas on patterns and colors. I read the newspapers both online and print in order to keep up with current events in the world. I read a lot of phone text messages from friends and family to stay close because I live far away from all of them. I guess my reasons for reading change depending on why I'm reading, but generally I just enjoy reading. It's just fun to me, like watching a movie or having a conversation with somebody. So again, that's my stance. It doesn't have to be your stance. You are totally welcome to have your own opinion on this one. Okay, that brings us up to assignment 10. We will tackle assignment 11 next week. 11, 12, and 13 next week are all kind of talking about news reports. So if you haven't read a newspaper in a while, it would be a great idea to go online or pick up a Wabate News or whatever and just kind of do a quick read through so that the assignments make a little more sense because you've kind of refreshed your memory of what newspaper articles are like. All right, thank you so much for coming out, and I will talk to you guys next week.